So my topic is media violence, and one of the main things that I realized when I was doing research for this, when we were doing the project before, was how much standards have changed from when we were kids and from like kids now. Right now in today's society, before you turn 18, you see 200,000 acts of violence just on TV alone, through movies and TV shows, which I think is a huge number. And the reason that's such a big deal is because while you're in that age, that's when your brain is developing the most. So think about these kids that are seeing the 2,000 acts of violence a day. Like, don't think of them as random kids. Think of them as your kid, your future kids. Think of them as your little siblings, your nieces, your nephews, your cousins. Like, these are the children that are out there today that are watching all these acts of violence. Over the years, what kids see on television do have an effect on them. It's been proven that whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, there is an effect that you have. What you see on TV does influence the way you live your life. The increase in violence in TV, movies, and in video games all have an effect on children. Alright, so there's a huge difference between what we watched as kids growing up and what kids watch now on TV, even at a young age. Think about what you watched when you were a kid. Like at a really young age, what did you watch on TV when you were getting ready for school or when your mom was getting ready for work? Probably like Barney or Sesame Street. That's what we watched as kids.
Mr. Rogers.
What about as you got a little bit older? Then we had Arthur and Doug. And like even shows that were a little bit violent were a lot different because they weren't realistic. Like how many of you watched Power Rangers? Right, but how many of you actually thought it was realistic to put on like colored spandex and go fight monsters? When we were growing up, the shows that we watched at a young age, whether it be like really young, like toddler age, or even in elementary school, they sent an educational message whether we realized it or not. When you were younger, you watched Sesame Street, and every day was brought to you by a letter, and it taught you things like that. And then as you got older, even the shows that you watched, like Doug, whether you realized it or not, they taught you relationship skills, they taught you how to handle your life and how to deal with issues. They sent you messages of friendship and problem solving. Like, think about it. If Doug and Roger had had a problem, like Roger would not have tried to steal Doug's girlfriend, and Doug would not have beat him up for it. But that's how shows today are, and kids at a young age are seeing that. Movies affect children also because they tend to give children this idea that if you're the superhero or if you're the good guy, then you can do whatever you want because you have the title of the good guy. I have a little brother, and this is how I know that children soak up anything, because you know that little kids, even at younger ages, tend to soak up the most inappropriate things and spit them out at the most inappropriate times. My little brother has a really lovely habit of seeing things on TV that are inappropriate, whether it be violence or whether it be like something having to do with sex. And when my grandparents come over, he decides that's the perfect time to tell them all about what he watched in Dumb and Dumber the night before. So kids do take in what they're seeing, and they don't tend to make that concept, like there's that line of appropriate and not appropriate and realistic and not realistic, and kids don't really understand the different sides of that line. Not only do they soak up everything that they see and not really understand it, but it has an effect that maybe even they don't realize, because they can't make that concept of realistic and not realistic. Not only do like inappropriate things get to them, but violence gets to them more than they realize. And it does tend to get into like their subconscious, which is where a lot of like childhood, not only childhood like anger problems come from, but also things like the nightmares and night terrors that a lot of younger kids have do tend to come from those shows. Another problem with this is, like I was saying before, with the bad guy, good guy concept. Kids see, you know, the superheroes in movies, they beat up other people, or when they watch the shows and they see, oh, well, this kid is being mean to this kid, and so he beat him up, and that was okay because he was the good guy. Well, then when they go to school, even, you know, if they see somebody being bullied and they beat them up, like, they're still going to get in trouble, even though they were technically, like, the good guy in the situation. And so that's another time when kids don't really understand the concept of this is in the TV show or this is in the movie, and so it's okay, or it's not okay. Another thing that's changed substantially since we were kids is video games. When I was younger, I was absolutely obsessed with Pac-Man. And it again comes to that concept of the reality that is in the video games now that wasn't before. I mean, obviously, like, I watch Batman, but I'm not sitting in dark rooms, like, trying to munch on little yellow pills and running from colored ghosts. But when kids play video games today, they don't play, like, Pac-Man or even Mario anymore. Like, my little brother plays, like Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that, and those are incredibly realistic. And the difference between video games and even TV shows is that with TV shows, you're watching somebody else do the violence, but with video games, you actually have hands-on skills that you actually learn from that. When kids are playing video games, it's more than just sitting back watching somebody else do the violence. It's them stealing the cars. It's them shooting the people. And it does have an impact on people. It does have an impact on the kids. So, in conclusion, what I would say to you is to be careful what you're having the kids watch on TV. Know that what they soak up from the television will have an impact on what they do. When they're playing video games, they're taking it as more than just a video game, and in both video games and in television and in movies, they have a hard time drawing that line between reality and what's not real, or even what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Television shows for kids at that young of an age should be educational, whether it be teaching them their ABCs or their 1, 2, 3s, or just teaching them the appropriate ways to deal with a conflict with a friend, because that's stuff that they're going to use for the rest of their life. So be careful when you're using the TV as a babysitter, because it's going to teach them just as much as an actual person would.